I feel like there's a bit of psychology that leads us to add complexity and to fight simplicity.
Say more about that.
I think part of it is there is something about having a complicated business that makes us feel like we have arrived. Right?
I love that. Because as you said that, it was like, oh yeah, if it's too easy, it feels like it's not valuable. Right.
Right.
And part of this comes from that whole, kind of pure work ethic thing. You need to be able to work hard. You need to be able to do hard work. And it's like, no, actually, if you can actually do easy work, that's actually good too. If it feels too easy, it's like, well, this must not be right.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Are you constantly adding new offerings, new tools, and systems to your business, but feeling like you're working harder than ever with less to show for it? Well, today we are challenging conventional business with wisdom. What if the path to greater success isn't about adding more, but strategically doing less? My name is Tonya Kubo, joined again by business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner. And today we are introducing a new series. I don't know about you, Gwen, but I love a good series. And our new series is called Simplify to Amplify. And what we are going to be talking about is how sometimes the best way to grow is to do less instead of more. So Gwen, why don't you just kick us right off and give us some context for this?
Well, first, because some people may hear from multiple of us, Krista Gasso, who is someone who's also an operation person, often talks about simplify to amplify.
Ooh, okay.
And you were not at the event, but I was and she was using that phrase a lot. So I want to make sure that we're not like, someone's like, oh, she totally stole Krista's thing. Because Krista and I will definitely go back. And this is one of those topics that we totally agree on. Hers, which was great, was simplify to scale. Right. And she also uses the phrases simplify to amplify. It's a great rhyme. And everybody loves a good rhyme.
I love a good rhyme. That's why I came up with it.
Yeah, no, it's a great rhyme. And it's 100% true. Anytime you take an element out of any sort of a system, and when I say system, I mean anything that we do. A behavior is a system, a habit is a system, a checklist is a system, the list goes on. If you can remove a step, an element, and really remove it, not like we're just not going to write it down anymore, but we still have to do it, right? But truly remove it, it will exponentially reduce the complexity.
Okay.
And as we reduce the complexity, that frees up so many things. It generally frees up time. It usually frees up cognitive load. It usually reduces errors. And all of those things can amplify your business.
Okay. So based on that information, I think there's probably going to be 3 areas that we're going to want to unpack in the series. Not today, but in the future. I think, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here, or at least clarify. So I think the first is going to be offerings, right? Your products and services is one area.
A lot to say there. Yeah.
Okay. I think the other is going to be your processes.
Yep. There's a lot to say there.
And if you say you don't have processes, I'm going to link a episode in the show notes that says even if you don't have them written down, you still have them. You just don't know them.
Has processes, whether you may not have documented processes, you may not have consistent processes, but everyone has processes.
Exactly. And then I would say the third's probably commitments, things you say yes to.
Yes. And commitments can look like all sorts of things. It can look like boundaries. It can look like the type of, customers and vendors that you work with. It can look like setting your own deadline. I mean, like, there's a whole lot about commitments. And there's some things that kind of fall into it that people wouldn't necessarily think. Like, I think of pricing also as a commitment.
Okay. I would put that under product and service offerings, but okay, tell me more about pricing as a commitment.
Well, a lot of folks try and like I said, they could fit in those as well. But a lot of times folks are trying to adjust their pricing based on who the client is. Okay. And I see this obviously it's way less likely in product. It's like, this thing is this thing and I don't charge you different because,
right.
You're someone else. Right. But services, a lot of times where it will say, well, normally I would charge X, but because they're smaller, bigger, more famous, less famous, there's all sorts of qualifications, I'm going to charge Y. Right. The problem is that takes a whole lot of cycles, a whole lot of thought, a whole lot of effort. And when you just commit to say the price that I charge for this thing, this service is X, that also is simplifying to amplify.
Okay. So I hear that and I look forward to that in the future.
It's making a commitment and sticking to it.
Right. Sometimes that's hard.
Yeah, that's part of the simplify to amplify as well.
Okay, so before we can unpack those areas, I think I need you to lay some groundwork for me. So the first question I have for you, because I do this, so really this is me getting free coaching again, just so we're all clear on what's going on here. What do you think it is that makes, I'm going to say businesses, because I'm a one-person business, but I know I've seen larger businesses do the same thing. What is it that makes most businesses drift toward unsustainable complexity over time?
Because somewhere in the world, we have been taught that more is better. More is better. And, to some degree, it comes out of us being in a capitalistic society. Right? There's some of it is coming out of, kind of what I'm going to call the social media comparison society that we're in.
Right.
Oh, they have this and I don't have that. That must be better. Right.
It's always better if I don't have it.
Yeah, exactly. The grass is greener. It's a version of grass is greener. Right. And so I think that and one of the favorites that you and I've talked about more than once, that I argue about all the live long time is if you're not growing, you're dying. Right. To me, this is also related to the more is better.
Right.
And so often in the way of making more, particularly with products, as we're adding products, right? For processes, sometimes it's like, well, I need to do more so that feels more value. And then on the, kind of the commitment side that it's like, if I need to be able to say I'm doing more, I need to show that I'm doing more to be, so I really think it's, if I was to take it back to one thing, and it's never as simple as one thing, but if I was to take it back to one thing, I think it's this kind of underlying belief that more is better. Okay.
So underlying belief that more is better, which I would also
to you, like, I'm curious because we haven't talked about this ahead of time. I'm really curious.
Yeah. This is like a totally unscripted episode. So more is better. I could see that. Also makes me think of hustle harder culture, right? We are definitely, I feel like we're pushing.
Version of more is better.
Right. But I think that's another way of framing it. And I do believe that we're in a space now where we're pushing against that collectively, but that doesn't mean that we haven't internalized it and it doesn't color our perspective, right? Two different, conscious and unconscious. There's all sorts of things I do that I know are not in my best interest, but I don't realize I'm doing them until I do. The other thing, though, it's something I refer to as a Franken business, which is that I think most of us, we start our business and we do whatever it is we believe we need to do the next thing. And we keep doing that. And unless we have hired somebody who forces us to, or our brain naturally does it, we very rarely step back to evaluate, is everything we've got going on in the best interest of where we want to go? So I'll just use a tech stack as an example, right? Because I think it's an easy example for everybody. It's, you started your business and you started using MailChimp because it was free, and you used, I don't know, let's say MailChimp because it was free, Calendly because that's what somebody told you was the best scheduler on the market, and you did PayPal processing, right? That's what you decided. And then as you go through, now suddenly your business is growing, your email list is bigger than what MailChimp offers for free. So you're paying for MailChimp. You are paying for Calendly. You've got PayPal, but PayPal doesn't operate quite the same way it used to. And Calendly has added a bunch of features that you haven't learned because why would you? It's still doing the thing that you needed to do. And oh, by the way, MailChimp is no longer the cheapest option for you because while it was the perfect solution for free, at the level of number of subscribers you have, there's actually much better services or cheaper services or whatever. But you never stepped back, and all you do is notice the gaps. And then you mention to somebody, oh, I've got this gap. And nobody says, oh, well, cancel MailChimp, go to, let's just say high level, and you'll knock out your scheduler and everything else for one low price. Instead, they say, oh, well, you just need this additional service. Right? And if you've been in business for 5 years, suddenly you've got a tech stack of 20 different software as a services, many of which have overlap that you have no idea about.
Yes. Now, the other thing is when you first started in this that hit my mind and was like, oh yeah, we need to say this too, is sometimes the complexity is the people we're talking to are high level visionaries that are quick starts that get started and then get distracted, and the shiny object syndrome adds to lots of complexity. And most people who are quick starts and high visionaries don't ever think about stopping the thing that they never quite finished or never quite got to the place they wanted it to be.
Right. And so then you're surrounded by things that are 60% done.
Right. Well, and even if they're kind of working, and it's like, yeah, but I don't really like this anymore. And they don't just say, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to close it. I'm going to end it. I'm going to merge it. No, they don't take that step because that's actually a pretty hard step mentally. Cause it's like, then I'm saying that failed. And it's like, no, not necessarily. You're just saying it's no longer the thing.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's like, and there's all sorts of aspects of this in businesses that we can drill into. Sometimes it's you work with a service provider who builds out like an automated process for you that you don't understand, but they told you needed it, so you went with it. But then when they exit and you're left to live with it because you don't understand it, all these things can go wrong with it, and you're patching things without ever addressing what the root cause is or even acknowledging what the root cause is.
Yeah. And back to the simpler something is, and I don't remember where it's someone famous, I'm pretty sure, made this quote, and I'm totally going to butcher it. So, put that disclaimer out there. But basically, make things as simple as you possibly can, no more complex, but also no more simpler than that either.
Right.
Right. But which means you can't just take it completely down to nothing, because at some point there is some level of complexity, but it's finding that balance of what are the things that we can get rid of, but what actually is necessity.
Yeah.
Right. And back to context matters, that will vary depending on a whole lot of other variables based on who you are, your business value, your core values, your business model, all of those things will, two businesses that look the same, but, aren't, this may be as simple as it can be, a high level complexity may be as simple as it can be. And someone else said, yeah, but I got rid of all of these things. Yeah, but part of it is the reason you're able to do that is there is some core, there's some behind the scenes things that really is about context. That means, no, we aren't the same.
Right.
So you can be simpler than I can. And that's, and in that case, both are right. But they're right for them, not right for everybody else.
Yeah. So I feel like there's a bit of psychology that leads us to add complexity and to fight simplicity.
Say more about that.
Yeah. And I think part of it is there is something about having a complicated business that makes us feel like we have arrived. Right?
I love that. Because as you said that, it was like, oh yeah, if it's too easy, it feels like it's not valuable. Right.
Right.
And part of this comes from that whole, kind of pure work ethic thing. It's, you need to be able to work hard. You need to be able to do hard work. And it's like, no, actually, if you can actually do easy work, that's actually good too.
Right.
Right. If it feels too easy, it's like, well, this must not be right.
Right. It's like, I must be doing something wrong if it's so simple, because I went into this, I'm surrounded by people who are complaining about all these moving parts. And if my business doesn't have the same moving parts, something must be wrong with it.
I love that you brought that up, because that is so 100% true. And when I hear that, the first thing I think about is also, it's kind of the other side of the coin of, just because it's easy for you doesn't mean it's easy for someone else, and vice versa.
Right. Like, this is a brief, but like, a writing example. So I was working with an editor, and I'm working on this very long piece. And so I was trying to do this thing where I took a story and I wove it in pieces throughout. And Gwen, it was hard, but I was trying to make it work. It's a model I've seen done before. And she said, well, like, I think it's fine, but why not just start with that one story? And then every new section, bring in like a vignette from a different story. Like, you're a great storyteller. Just do that. And I said, can I? And she went, well, I mean, yeah, like, you're a journalist. You could totally do that. And I said, see, because I had that thought initially, that's what I wanted to do. But I thought I was hiding behind my journalism background. And I was using my journalism background as a crutch, because it feels easy to just find 10 people's stories, interview them, and incorporate the pieces that work in every section, then forcing this one story to serve 10 purposes.
I love that.
And only a former journalist says interviewing 10 people is the easy way out.
Right. And of course, there's some number of us, including the person sitting on this side of the microphone, saying, oh God, that would be the worst. Right?
But
although when you said that, it was like, oh yeah, but I could probably pull 10 stories out of clients and, things. But right, trying to find the story, almost impossible.
Right. And so, but it's an example of totally felt too easy for me, but I could totally see where somebody else would say, well, if that's what I have to do, I'm out.
Right.
Right. So easy for us is not necessarily easy for everybody. And we actually aren't lazy if we choose a business that leans so heavily on our strengths and our natural interests that it doesn't feel like work. That's actually an okay thing.
Right. So, you gave a you story. Let me give a me story.
Yeah.
Right? That is all the same type of thing. And I know you laugh about this all the time. Mm-hmm. But for most people, they would see my calendar as living hell.
Yes.
So be like,
I see your calendar. Yes.
Yes. I know you know this, because I know that's actually how you respond to it. When you see my calendar, you do have to look at my calendar. And I know it just gives you the heebie-jeebies every time that you see it, because it looks complex and crazy, and it's back to back, and it's got all of those things. But that's actually easy for me, because of who I am and my personality and all of the other things. And, we've had more than one time where I've said, yeah, I've been on back-to-back calls for 6 hours. It's been a great day. And you're just, because we're starting the 7th call of hour 7, right?
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's been a great day, bye. But this is back to, just because it's easy for me, trying to convince you that your life would be so much better if you were on back-to-back calls, right? Isn't true, right? But you trying to talk me out of it also doesn't necessarily make my life easier.
Right.
Right. Because for me, it actually removes the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
It streamlines it for me because I only have to pay attention to my count.
Right.
Right. Simplify to amplify doesn't sound simpler. It actually is simpler in the way that my mind works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think other ways that our head gets in our way here, I think we resist simplification because of FOMO.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right. I think especially when it comes to like offerings, I think we're so terrified we're leaving dollars on the table.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. When we can have an abundance mindset, that there's plenty, and the piece I get is plenty for what I need, and I don't need to take it all. I absolutely think that it becomes easier to simplify.
Yeah. So I think
it's okay that I'm not offering this piece of the service.
Yeah. So I think that it's the fear of missing out of dollars, or let's say, like in marketing world, we'd say market share. I also see it with like your tech stack. Oftentimes you're afraid you're missing out on the latest, greatest tool to do a thing, even though the tools you have are doing the thing perfectly fine. On processes, I think there's a lot of people who it's shiny object syndrome. They're afraid that the process they're following is not the best process. So they're constantly trying to figure out different processes.
Well, and I think that one in particular also is about someone else raves about their process.
Yep.
And in their raving, it's like, well, I don't rave about my process. So my process must not be good enough. I need to use their process. But one of the things I talk to people a lot about is when someone is raving about things like that, what it usually means is my prior situation was so horrendous that when I discovered this transformed my life, my business, my, fill in, whatever, ever blank. And I want you to have a similar transformation. But what we miss is back to context. It may not be appropriate for your context, for your situation.
Right.
And you may not need the transformation. You may not be raving about it, but if it's like chunking along, just like absolute top end clockwork, you don't actually need a transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I would say the other place where I see FOMO, right, is the commitments piece. We're so afraid to not be in the room where the cool stuff happens.
And of course, this, we talk about this with boundaries all the time, but when you say yes to something, you are inadvertently saying no to something else. You often don't know what it is. But you are saying no to something else in some way or shape or form. Might not have been better, but might have been better. You don't know.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would say, and I bet you're going to have a little bit to say about this, but it's the sunk cost fallacy, right? We hesitate to let go of things that we've invested in.
Yeah. The sunk cost is a real thing. And it's hard to overcome because it really is a very much of a natural thing. I've made this investment. And so I need to see it through. But often there's a point, it's like, this investment is never going to do what it needs to do, right? Investment, time, energy, money,
Yeah.
When I say investment, I'm saying, all of the things that we can invest, right? And it really is throwing, good money after bad, good time after bad, good energy. We always say good money after bad, but it's whatever we're investing and all of the things that we're investing, right? I can put another 100 hours into this, but it's not going to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's never going to get me the result that I need. And what if I took those 100 hours and just took it someplace else? I recently had a conversation with one of my good friends. Her name's Natalie Elko. And she was talking about, can you visualize like stepping through a wall and kind of, I know you know this because you're like me, but like the Hogwarts wall, that when it closes back up, there's no evidence that it was ever there.
Yeah.
Right? So that completely solid wall is right behind you. And so none of that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Then what would you do going forward? If everything behind you didn't exist? Now we can't really do that because obviously everything that's happened before is how we get here. But if you said, I just started today on the planet and I started here, now what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then all that sunk cost stuff doesn't matter. And it would like, oh, I'm going to chase this thing. Right? I still get to know all the things I know, but today is the first day on the planet. It changes.
Yeah. And then I would say the last thing that I think, the last psychological barrier I've seen is, I want to call it vanity, but that's not kind. But it's identity attachment. Well, it is ego, but it's this identity attachment, like your business offerings and the complexity of the structure around those offerings become tied to your self-worth. Example I'll use of this is, I have seen, and in fact, our very first episode talked about this, the business owners who build out these like really complex, high featured, high ticket programs, and find themselves like it has become its own machine that has to be constantly fed, right? They have to have a certain number of staff members to offer the level of service that people expect when they're paying $25,000 a year or so. They have to have the amount of availability that's expected when people are paying that amount. They have to, in some cases, some of these offers are like they're one size fits all solutions, right? They're your fractional C-suite. And so there's 10 hours of calls per week and there's all of this stuff that supports it. And even though they're exhausted, even though they recognize that they could be just as profitable or maybe even more profitable, if they cut that entirely and scaled back to maybe doing one-on-one, or maybe they want to just commoditize and be a course creator or whatever, it feels like failure. Even though it would make them more profitable, even though it would buy back their time and so many other things, it feels humiliating. And it's fear, right? They're afraid. But I think it's because they have allowed their identity to get too closely woven in to what they offer.
Yeah. And like I said, that really is ego in all definitions of ego. Like it's the psychological definition of ego is what, we're attached to, from an outside perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I do think that adds to the complexity. And as I'll say an adjunct to that is where we actually are doing the thing that we want in a successful way, and we see somebody else who's doing this more complex thing and says, I need to be that to be validated, to be considered the best, fill in whatever kind of blank that you want there. And so you take what's actually working for you and add complexity so that you now are in that space, but you're miserable in that space.
Yeah.
Right. Where if you actually could be living their life, they're looking at you saying, oh, I wish I was like, I wish I was like Tonya.
Right.
I remember being like Tonya and I had more space. I had more time. I was happier and I was actually putting more money in my pocket. Right. And so a lot of times those people are looking at the people who are saying, oh, I want to be you. And they're looking back the other way and saying, no, I wish I was back. That was a much better space where it was simpler.
Okay, Gwen, I feel like I feel like this is a good introduction to the topic.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many places we can simplify. There really are. And it is the thing that we challenge our clients to every quarter when we have our quarter session is find one thing to delete.
Yeah.
Right. Because, and we didn't even talk about this, but it's the shoulds.
Right.
The shoulds add a lot to our complexity, and many of the shoulds we can get rid of, which will simplify. And knowing, I've said it for years, simpler is better.
Mm-hmm.
It really is in almost everything on the planet. Simpler.
Yeah.
You can have a super, super complex recipe, and you can also have a recipe that has 4 ingredients. And often the recipe that has 4 ingredients is actually better than the one that has 20.
Yes.
Because the other thing is the one with 4 ingredients, people make correctly consistently.
Right.
Right. The one with 20 ingredients, there's, 15 other places just in the ingredient that it can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone all the steps and, everything else.
Yeah. So what I like about kind of where you're leaving us is the idea, the reality that simplifying is not shrinking your ambition.
No, it's actually way harder than being complex. So many different people get attributed to this quote, but if I would have had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. I've heard 5 or 6 different, famous people get,
Mark Twain.
Yeah. Mark Twain is one, but I've heard like 3 or 4 other. Yeah, I don't know. So whoever is the right person, but that's really true, right? A TED Talk is way harder to give than an hour keynote.
Yeah.
Simpler is not easier. It's not the shortcut. It's not the easy way out, but it is more likely to create success because less things can go wrong.
Oh, so good. So good. Okay. So if you're ready to identify what you should be eliminating from your business to achieve greater success with less stress, you're going to want to come back. I think we're going to have probably an additional 3 episodes on this easily for this series. And if you don't want to wait for that, I think Insight to Impact, which is our weekly premium accountability subscription, could be the right next step for you. What it does is it provides a thought-provoking question every single Friday. If you choose to respond, you get an equally thoughtful, personalized response back from Gwen, sometimes from me, that will help you examine your business and maybe even evaluate what could simplify so that you can grow to where you want to be. Head over to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.